Hello, people. Welcome to the community of the Growth Mindset podcast. Guys, if you are a first time listener, don't forget to subscribe on whichever platform you're listening from so that you don't miss on more interesting episodes coming up in following weeks. And for our daily listeners, here we are again with a new episode where we will interview another interesting personality from a unique industry and understand how they were able to accomplish this great level of success. Remember, this is a podcast where we learn easy, practical methods and tips that we can implement in our daily lives from the very best and the most successful people known today. Because as we all know, success leaves clues. And we, the people having the growth mindset, will use these clues to create a better, more fulfilling, and a successful life. So, let the growth begin. Exactly. And then you mentioned a very important point as well, right? You mentioned the challenges that what exactly is happening in social media, as well as you've also given what they can do in terms of, protecting them. So for example, not following unwanted accounts or news that basically would make you feel bad or feel that you don't deserve this or you don't deserve that. Second thing could obviously be, as you said, making sure that saying no or taking a break from social media platforms, saying that okay, this is the time when I'm not going to use it. And I think third
Hmm.
thing which I would also like to add for listeners who are basically listening to the podcast would, if you also observe, guys, right, that somebody is attacking you on social media platforms, or it could be Facebook, Google, it's fine. I mean, like, you don't have to respond to everybody. Don't take it personally. The guy sitting at the other end, you don't even know who that person is. Actually, there are so many people who may just come randomly, just comment and go. You don't have to waste or think or worry about that specific comment and take your peace of mind or throw your peace of mind away for somebody who does not even know what you are doing, right? So
Hmm.
making ourselves emotionally little disattached from what people have to say, and you should know basically what your self-worth is. I think life would become much more easier for all of us, and our mental health could be a little better than what uh, could be affected
Ab-
otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just add another small piece to that, that there are also reporting mechanisms which are available, which people should be aware of. And if you need to do something about it, then you don't need to necessarily personally get entangled in that space, but utilize the system, the laws, the mechanisms that are provided by each and every social media platform, along with with the authorities. There are lots of reporting guidelines which are there, and one must utilize those as well if required, and
Correct.
don't hesitate. It's a myth and a misnomer that you would get harassed or it will create some sort of an issue for you. That's not the case at all.
True.
um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Going back to the part where we were talking about relationships, right? Now, what are some common challenges that people are coming to and complaining about? What are some challenges that people are facing in their relationships?
um, I think the challenges have perhaps largely remained the same across generations. I think the modes in which they operate have changed over time. So I think one of the primary issues that even occurs today is communication. Previously there weren't too many means of communication. Now you have too many modes of communication, and yet
True.
people struggle to connect with each other. And I feel that oftentimes that becomes a large issue. uh, 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 I think trust is another space where people really struggle these days. Again, because there are so many various means through which people stay connected to different people, and our world has shrunk. And you're not just connected to someone uh, in your immediate vicinity. You're connected to people across the globe, and somewhere it can be very very easy for partners or for individuals to feel a little insecure, especially if their own relationship, the communication hasn't been going fine, and there have been a lot of conflicts which have been emerging, or there is a sense of disdain which is coming into the relationship, or there is some amount of hostility which is there. And that could just kind of keep on festering and building up that level of insecurity within that space and take away from the trust repeatedly. um, I also feel that one of the you know, perhaps not such a big word, but I think perhaps one of those, the fact that lives are as busy as they are, and people have so many things going on, it kind of takes away from the kind of time that one does have, and we don't necessarily end up prioritizing our relationship oftentimes. And there is this tussle that I have seen a lot of young people go through these days, which is between, should I prioritize me or should I prioritize the us? And that becomes a huge battle. I feel, and that I think somewhere does kind of get into a problematic space for a lot of people. Those would be three very broad things. In fact, now that you mention it, because one has been seeing so many of these issues emerging, in fact, I'm been writing this book now, which is on relationships, and hopefully it will release sometime early next year, which is in HarperCollins India. And the whole idea was that we see so many challenges which are happening in this relationship space, that it's very important for us to start finding those mechanisms, especially for the younger population, to start figuring out how can they consolidate their relationships, and how can they feel more secure within that space that they occupy. And I think what's also happened is that, because you hear of so many breakups and you hear of so many marriages not doing in the best way, a lot of people have started developing this thought process that shadi karni nahi chahiye, you should not get
True.
you
Yeah.
know it's best to, and I think that's not true. I think we're being very unfair when we're making such a generalized assumption about relationships, that they just don't work or they can't be for the long run, or we need to find some sort of middle ground which could give us the convenience of being together and yet having the opportunity to be able to exit. I don't think that works. Security is a very, very critical component within a relationship, and if you will always have a quarter or a half leg outside of the relationship, then it's always going to be an insecure space. It won't be a
Correct.
safe space for both the partners, and that would certainly eat into the relationship and the dynamic that exists between
Definitely.
people.
And just because you mentioned a very important point, you said how to prioritize. Should it be you first or should it be us? What do you think? What is your suggestion? Should it be first ourselves or it should be first us?
The funny part is that it needs to be both.
Hmm.
there has to be there has to be ample time in which you're doing things for your own self, and there also needs to be concurrently a similarish time where you are devoting it to the couple.
Mhm.
And that's the mistake people make, that you feel that there needs to be a choice. It doesn't have to be a choice. It has to be both. And it's only when you're doing things together and you are prioritizing the couple dynamic, and simultaneously the two of you then together decide to also take out some time and space for the individual activities that you would like to do, the things that you individually thrive on also. That's where you can find that right balance. So it's tricky, but it's doable. You need both of them. You can't live with one or the other.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a very good important point. Like, because I always thought, first party has to be you, and then comes
Mhm.
us. But a very beautiful answer where you need to obviously have both in balance. Wherein first you also take time out for yourself and do what you love. Also give your partner the room to go and try what she thrives on, what she likes, and then find a middle ground where you both can also spend time together and grow together. That's an amazing perspective that I personally got today. Thank you so much. I'm sure it would
And
help me in great ways. Uh, Going back to the other end, wherein talking about relationships, right? What is that specific, let's say, age group, or are these most cases that you're seeing are newlyweds, let's say 25 to 30 years cases, or do you think they are more in 40 years and 45 years of age group?
we're seeing across the spectrum.
Yeah.
We're people coming who dating each other. We see people who come in, you know, much early post marriage, and we're seeing people who've been married and together for 10, 15, 20 years, recognizing that there have been issues which they've always chosen to ignore, but saying that, okay, we've heard about therapy, we've heard that there can be relationship counseling. We want to take a chance and try and see we can fix our issues. So we're here at your disposal.
Hmm.
Tell us what we can do.
And when do people realize that? Like, how can a couple realize that, okay, now we have to go and visit somebody to talk about this?
You know, I think again a few things. If any two people will always have some sort of a disagreement, it's about how do you resolve those disagreements. If you can find either a common platform from which you operate, or both of you are able to comfortably align yourselves with either one or the other person's approach, and comfortably being the key word. Sometimes it's about one partner, sometimes it's about the other partner. Then most issues can get resolved pretty easily. It's
Mhm.
also about learning to let go, because you will not always have things happen in the way that you would like for them to be. And I think that's one realization that is very critical, because we oftentimes get stuck in our mind with the thought that, but I did not want it to be like this. It needed to be something different. And because I'm just seeking that different, I forget to look at what is there in front of me, and can that also be good enough or not. So the good in that moment gets completely lost, because I'm still stuck on looking at what could have been there or should have been there. So I think that kind of can become a big issue for people. um, but the key is that if you're seeing that your problems are just not getting resolved, in fact they're only becoming more intense, you're struggling to spend quality time with each other. And by quality time I mean, um, essentially that when you do spend the time together, you end up having a quarrel, or you just feel that you can't share your perspective with your partner. You find that you're withholding a lot of information or perspectives from each other, because you don't feel that your perspective would either be embraced or it would have its own space. Those are big red flags. Or if you see that there is a clear environment of hostility, aggression, which is coming in, and it doesn't have to be physical, it doesn't also have to be necessarily use of abuse language. It could also be just that there is a sheer disregard for the other person's perspective, and often the aggression is in terms of just brushing aside what your partner is saying. And if
Mm.
that's coming into play as well, that could also be a big problem, which you need to be wary of. And if you're seeing these things, you've tried to address it, and I would always say try to address it yourself. If you see the first red flags, if you try to nip it in the bud, oftentimes things don't become conflagrated, and you can always try to prevent them from becoming such big issues. But if despite all of that it's not worked out, and you still see yourself going downhill, then you must seek help. And unfortunately, one of the other aspects which does highlight a larger problem is if you are finding yourself considering getting involved with someone else, which is
Mm.
something that does happen, which is something that we have seen happen a lot of times. If you find yourself contemplating and thinking about another person and being involved with that person, that's a big red flag that something is really missing in your relationship, and you
Makes
may need to
sense.
address it. It may not be a conflictual space in your relationship, but something may be going largely amiss, which is making you seek that thing
Correct.
outside.
Correct, exactly. Oh, that's that. Those are some really important points that I think, yeah, people should consider. And I think there's also a correlation between, let's say, if there are married couple and they have kids, right? And if they are fighting a lot in the house, even the environment at the house becomes bad, and then that may have an effect on the kids as well, right? There is a possibility wherein that could affect the kids. Now, I want to go back to the mental health part, wherein do you think people who consume a lot of alcohol or drugs are more prone to getting depressed, or does this something like, is there any statistics, or Eddie, do you think there is something like that, which any correlation between drugs and mental health?
Substance and mental
Yeah.
health illnesses are a reality. And alcohol too is a substance. I think it's a misnomer and a myth to think that alcohol is not. For us, even cigarette smoking is an issue, right? We would suggest that you should stay away from everything. All of these are all of these are products which tend to alter the way in which you think, feel, behave. And for me, those are your essence, those form the essence of your mental health. Anything
100%.
in those three aspects, right, it can easily become a problem. And you will often notice when people are intoxicated or under the influence of any substance, there is a shift in their behavior, their thinking patterns, the way they are responding to situations. There is a disinhibition which happens, and there and if you are seeking that altered state, and somewhere it is becoming an escape mechanism for you, and which is something a lot of people do mention that, besides of course the fact that the substances are addictive and biologically the brain becomes dependent on it, that's a different part of it. But the fact that a lot of times people start out first with experimenting, saying that, okay, my peer group is taking it, let me try and see what it's like. And then when I start trying it, I see that, okay, it's an altered experience. I either like it, or I feel it allows me to dull or numb my senses, or I feel that, it gives me that kind of an uplifted feeling which I otherwise don't feel in the day. Those are very problematic situations because you can't control that experience. And substance induced mental health illnesses can be a very big issue, which includes problems like depression. A lot of people end up having anxiety disorders. A lot of people are known to have psychotic illnesses as well because of the consumption of substances, including even alcohol. And you can't necessarily control, and say that, okay, I'm going to be able to stop it immediately. A lot of people think that they would be able to, and then when they do try to, they find themselves in a situation where they're not able to.
True.
And as mental health experts, our advice is always very clear: stay away from all substances of any kind.
Makes sense. Now, do you have any specific case or a story wherein a particular person was maybe attached or addicted to some substance, or it could be any specific case which was a difficult case, but then once you guys started working, it came out victorious and that guy was able to beat that specific addiction?
There are a lot of stories of victory and a lot of stories in which people have been able to work through their mental health concerns, not just with addictions. And I think addictions do become that one space because they can be rather hard for people to consider that they can keep them. There is a lot of struggle in that, and so I understand where the question comes from. It's just that, yes, there have been multiple people who I've worked with who may have had a long history of substance use, substance abuse, strong dependency, which may have included multiple substances, and it's usually a collaborative effort to get the person into that space where they're being able to take care of themselves and they are being able to manage their addiction. It involves a lot of biological management as well, and I can't deny that component. It's not something that us therapists do alone. There is that very, very significant biological aspect which is involved in substance use disorders. And that's primarily the psychiatrists and other medical experts who do help with that. Our role comes in figuring out where do the addictions arise from. And oftentimes we may have seen that there are family dynamics, or there have been experiences which could be of a traumatic nature, or it's just a dependency which developed out of sheer simple uh, experimentation, and the biological dependency getting triggered. And it takes a lot of effort. It's not easy. I have seen people come through it and have very, very successful lives thereafter, but it's always a work in progress. And I think that's
Yeah.
something which is very important to remember when you're looking at addictions, that the fight does not stop there. It does not stop at the point where you say that, okay, today I'm not consuming substances. It's a continuous process. And this is something where if you were to go to and speak to someone from an AA group or an NA group, they would also say that your journey is a lifelong journey. It's a lifelong battle. And because the triggers tend to be many, and the mind has become so hardwired that when you see a difficult situation, the trigger can be to say that I want to go back to that
Correct.
substance. And
Correct.
you always have to be on the vigil. And and that's perhaps one of the most difficult part of it. But like I was saying, that there are so many of these cases where I have seen people recover successfully, lead very, very good lives, married, settled with full-fledged family lives, but still continuously working on ensuring that they stay addiction free. And
Correct.
that is the critical aspect which ensures that they are doing fine, and they are able to take care of their health and well-being, because otherwise the devastation that can happen is very far-reaching, and which is
Definitely.
what they have to do when they hit rock bottom. There's disruption which is happening at multiple levels, and which is very, very hard to manage.
And then I think the reason also being because once I spoke to one of an author, a best-selling author on psychology. So he did mention, he told me that, Irshad, basically whenever people have addiction, then normally it's an escape for them to release those neurons like oxytocin or dopamine, which are like feel good factor for you, and then you get hooked onto those releasing those specific hormones, and that only happens through drugs or substance. But then if you actually have to beat that specific addiction, or say something like that, you would have to move out of that and find different ways wherein you can release those same hormones. It could be going to the gym, instilling more new habits, so that that could help you release the hormones instead of using a substance in the other way,
So
like going out, running to the gym, throwing that things out, so that you actually start feeling good about it and then get rid of all those negative aspects.
absolutely, and it's a lot of work. It's
Yeah,
not, you don't just end up working with the individual. One would end up working with their entire family. This would include, if say for instance this is someone who's married, it would also include their partner. If they have children, then the children as well, because the impact of the addiction is not just on the individual; it's on the entire
true,
ecosystem.
true.
And they could have parents, if there are some issues that are unresolved, and aspects of their previous years of living which are interfering, then you have to look at those together. And it's a pretty hard journey, because a lot of things, we also block out a lot of things, and it can be very hard to try to delve into those parts, and it takes a lot of time. And I think which is why we keep insisting that stay away from all substances, because you don't know the kind of havoc it can wreak in your life. And even as something as simple as a marijuana, which people feel is it's no big deal, if
True.
I smoke it, or if I've taken some weed. In fact, marijuana induced psychosis is one of the most common mental health related issues,
Wow.
and it's a large percentage of the population, and the number of people who have anxiety disorders because of marijuana uses is huge.
Wow.
And if you because we don't understand these aspects, a lot of times we get drawn into these, because we see people around us consuming these substances, or we hear that there are countries which have legalized it, or and we don't understand what could be the different mechanisms which are at play. Or people will come up to me and say that oh, it's used medicinally, but you don't know it's being used in micrograms, and you're talking about consumption in grams, and there's a huge difference.
True.
So a lot of these things come into play, because people are not always fully informed about um, what it is, why is it there, why do we say no, why do we suggest stay away from it, the kind of problems that can emanate, and it could really, really compromise. And we've seen the devastating impact it can have on people's lives, especially because we work in healthcare, we work in mental health, we run an inpatient setup as well, and we see people coming in and going out of rehab centers, and it's very hard to see the impact it has on their lives for the long run.
Def-
It's not easy.
Definitely. And I love the answer where you said, that it's work in progress. I believe, yeah, I mean, there is until unless the day you die, I mean, you continuously every single day have to work on yourself, make sure that you're not going to any substance abuse, because there is more to life than that. Now, there are a last 2 3 questions. I know we are coming to the end of the interview. There are 2 3 questions basically I want to ask you. Now, what are some good books that people can read that can help them become more self-aware and get more information about mental health? Any books that you recommend?
I wouldn't necessarily go and say that, read any specific book. I feel that generally reading is a very, very good habit to cultivate. The reason I don't recommend specific books is because I feel every individual needs to figure out what genre works for them. And I look at reading more as a tool to unwind, relax, give your mind a
Hmm.
break, and not necessarily, and that in itself works wonderfully for your mental health, right?
Hmm.
So if you
Correct.
can instead look at finding genres which work for you, it could be fiction, it could be non-fiction, it could be a self-help book, it could be, anything under the sun which you connect with. I would reinforce that you should read. I feel reading is a wonderful habit. In fact, when we talk to people about sleep hygiene, this is the one thing that we tell them, that at bed, at around your bedtime, instead of picking up your phone and watching a video, or going through something on your social media, shut your gadget, put it aside, pick up a book and read to the point that you're falling asleep, because that ensures that you have the best quality of sleep, because reading just shuts out the different parts of your brain, takes away all your thoughts, and it gives you a very good restful sleep. So I would say inculcate reading as a habit, um, instead of looking at specific books that I would recommend. But I would also say one thing, which is in addition to what I was mentioning about reading. If you are struggling with mental health issues, don't read too much also on mental health related problems, because I think what happens is that you end up filling your mind with so much information,
Correct.
and all of which may not necessarily be the most accurate or applicable to you, because each
Hmm.
individual is very unique, and you may not necessarily be equipped to understand what information is relevant or related to you. So it would also be very important that if you want to read, work with the specific expert who you are working with. Ask them what could be best suited to you. They may in fact be able to tell you more instead of me suggesting a specific book right now. And pick up what they suggest to you, and only look at the part that they suggest you should read. Don't go beyond that.
Sure.
Because otherwise, and this is something that we work in hospitals, so a lot of the doctors come and tell us that आजकल एक और doctor आ गया है, that is Dr. Google. Everyone reads it
True.
and comes to us, and that can be a big issue, because you may not realize it, but it may start influencing what you're thinking and feeling as well. And so
Exactly.
should stay
Hmm.
away from information also.
Okay, makes sense. And any three advice, Kamna, that you'd like to give the listeners to manage their mental health better?
I would say do two, three things. One is that be willing to understand that you too can struggle with maintaining your mental health and your sense of positivity and optimism. And when you are in the midst of difficult circumstances, you can feel low and anxious, and that does not mean that you need to rush to an expert. When bad things happen, bad feelings emerge, bad thoughts emerge, and usually they do settle down. So I think that's one very important understanding. Like, for instance, right now in the midst of this lockdown, it is normal for us to feel anxious, and we need to embrace and accept it. It's only when you accept what you are feeling and experiencing that you can also change it, because
Correct.
that's when you're understanding what's going on. So I think that's very critical to your mental health, to try and understand what's going on and be more self-aware. The second part is, I would say that you should certainly look at speaking to people around you. If you are struggling with any kind of an issue, we a lot of times become very hesitant and feel that we would get judged by people. I think these are myths a lot of times, and if you are surrounded by people who are judging you, then in any case you need to rethink your social network and make an
Definitely.
effort. But if you know that they won't, but you're still hesitant, then you need to change yourself. Talking does not make us weak. Talking does not mean that there is something wrong with you. In fact, it is one of the best things to ensure that you do well in your life. So I think that would be the second aspect that I would like to reinforce. And the third thing is, find the time for the things that you love. Something that we end up very, very easily ignoring, something that I would have ignored at multiple points in my life as well. I'm not saying that I'm any different, but I like recently in this entire lockdown, I made a very conscious effort to go back to painting. I used to paint a lot when I was a young person, and for the last 10-12 years I haven't done as much. But now if you go onto my social media, on my Instagram, and you look, that there are lots of paintings which have started coming up, and I joined a group of urban sketchers in Delhi as well, and I was like, I need to find that time. I need to make that time and cultivate that time to ensure that I'm doing the things that I do love, which give me joy, because those help you maintain your mental health. They allow your head to kind of just shut down, and you can have your moments of relaxation on a daily basis, and you can find ways to beat your stressors easily. So you should do that as well.
Definitely. So those are some really solid advice. Especially, I love the second and third one. Second one, wherein you actually evaluate who are you hanging out with, right? And if those guys are not actually helping you and they're putting you down, then you really need to evaluate, are these guys really gonna help you? Because if you're hanging out with these guys for the rest of your life, you're never gonna go to the next level. So find people who believe in you, who wanna help you grow, so that you can succeed in life as well as your friends. And the third one, obviously, wherein you actually take your time out for the things you love. That's very important. Last two questions I want to ask you, Kamna. This is a question that I normally ask almost all the guests that come on my podcast, right? Now, for this, you'll have to imagine that, say 20 years, 25 years from now, you have kids, and you old, you around 70, 75, and let's say this is the last day of you on this world, right? And there are only two advices that you can give your kids. Two advice. It could be anything, personal, professional, anything that you like. What those two advice are gonna be?
I think that's a very hard one. Not an easy one at all.
Yeah.
Considering I'm at the halfway mark right now, so it's very hard. I think the first advice would be to something my father used to tell me. He's no longer with us, but something that my dad used to always reinforce. One, which was to say that never lose your belief in your own self. Be true to your own self and live your life based on the principles and the values that you have, the morals that you have, because they will always guide you the way they always have throughout, and it will allow you to be able to feel okay across situations, even if things are not turning out fine. Because when you reflect and look back, at least you would know that you did the best as per what your understanding and your moral and your ethical system was, and that it won't have changed regardless of when that situation would have emerged in your life. So I think that would be one advice that I would certainly give them, that you need to be true to yourself and operate on the basis of your moral ethical value system, which you've always had and held on to. And I think the second thing that I would I would perhaps tell them would be that learn to be compassionate, learn to be gentle, not just with others, but also with your own self. We can be very harsh with our own self. We can certainly be very harsh with others. But if you can find that capacity within you to be able to be a little gentle, a little compassionate, I think the society that we're living in would be certainly much, much better. We need to find that spirit of altruism,
Yeah.
and so that we can make a lot of collective efforts to be able to emerge out of difficult situations together.
Absolutely.
So I think
There is one last question that I want to ask you, right? You know what the growth mindset is all about? The growth mindset is all about you trying to work on yourself, improve yourself on a regular basis, and become a better version of yourself every single day. Now, what can people do to develop this growth mindset according to you? Any one thing?
um develop a habit of being introspective and reflective. I think we are very impulsive in the ways that we act. We just do things because we're in the habit of, just do it cyclically, habitually, and there is not a lot of mindful engagement with what you're doing. I think if you can bring in that mindfulness in the moment and the ability to reflect and introspect after the moment has passed, I think it would allow you to grow and determine whether what you're doing is something that you are actually okay with or not, and you'll be able to identify the areas of change for yourself.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kamna, for taking your time out and joining us for the Growth Mindset podcast. I'm sure that the wisdom, the amount of information you have given us today will definitely benefit a lot of people out there. And where are some platforms, or where can people connect with you?
The easiest way to connect with me is through my social media accounts. I'm there on Instagram. My handle is nurture the mind underscore Kamna C. You can join me over there. I try to stay pretty active on that. I'm on Twitter as well, and my handle is Kamna underscore Chhibber over there. You can always shoot an email to me. That's kamna.chhibber@fortishealthcare.com. Most of this information is also available on Google, so you can just type out my name, and I'm sure you'll figure
Yeah.
it out. My surname is slightly difficult to spell. It's Chhibber with a double H and a double B.
Yeah, it's unique actually.
Yeah, it can get confusing for people. So people can certainly get to know more about what I'm doing on my social media accounts, and they can always connect with me over there. I'm fairly active and responsive, whether it's a DM on Instagram or a message on Twitter. I do respond, so please feel free to connect.